Hello there, and welcome to Sweet Child of Time. I'm your host, Steve Barnes. Today, we're going to be talking about Time Bandits, the movie. We have to revisit this one because the TV show is coming out July 24th. Still no trailer, still no clips from the show yet, but we can revisit this movie and get back into the Time Bandits mode of things. And because we're doing a movie, I'm bringing back our resident film critic. You know her from one of my stories. You know her from Sweet Child of Time. It's Lindsey Dunn. Ahoy there, Lindsey.
Oi, Steve. I can't wait to dive into your childhood psyche.
I know, like you get to see some, you now have seen some of the visuals that have gone through my head like all my life. I'm proud to share them with you. And also with us this week, we have a guest from the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast and from the Hot Nuance Book Club podcast. It's my old pal, Aradiapedia. Ahoy there, Aradia.
Ahoy. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to call you an old pal, even though we've only met once. I appreciate that.
We've known each other on Discord for a while.
It has been a while. So yeah, half my guests are like, oh my God, I can't believe you have a radio on your podcast. And the other half are like, please, Steve, introduce us to your guest so we can know what she's into. So yeah, Radio, go for it. Yeah, tell us a little about Wheel of Time Spoilers, what it's all about, and like what the process is.
Yeah, totally. So Wheel of Time Spoilers is my first podcast, my main podcast, the podcast that has taught me everything. I started out as a fan of it, listening to it, because I'm really into Wheel of Time and the rereads. And I stumbled across this podcast and ended up becoming the most vocal and annoying fan in their Discord, constantly talking back to them, telling them they were wrong. Somehow I ended up in the co-host chair and doing all the editing and producing. And yeah, Wheel of Time Spoilers is a reread podcast. So we are, as the name might imply, full spoilers for the entire Wheel of Time series. So you have to have been the kind of person who read 14 books plus a prologue in order to even begin to be our target audience. So we have a pretty small target audience. But through that, I've met a lot of really fantastic people and broadened my connections and my skill sets. And I have now started the Hot Nuance Book Club with two friends that I met via the Wheel of Time community. But we are talking about not the Wheel of Time at all. We're doing childhood books that influenced us as we were kids coming up kind of in parallel to Wheel of Time. That's sort of the shtick of that. And yeah, I just am really into producing podcasts. That's kind of my passion. And otherwise, I love telling people about geology. You can hit me up with geology questions anywhere, anytime. Happy to rant.
I don't even know what questions to ask. That's how much into geology I am. I wouldn't even know what to begin to talk about. So hats off to you. Yeah, with Wheel of Time, of course, you're a huge part of the circle that I enjoy because I'm a Wheel of Time fan too. But I find myself on the outskirts of a lot of the Wheel of Time communities. Just, I don't even know why. It's just general vibe, I suppose. And I've tried out a bunch of different podcasts, bunch of different communities. And it just seems like the Wheel of Time Spoilers just has like the most open, friendly, and funny community around. So I really appreciate you guys having that community. And you'll be happy to know that Lindsey is like the Aradiapedia of my podcast because she started out as a listener and she was writing in. She wouldn't exactly tell us we were wrong, but, you know, she would argue points and stuff. And then look at her now. Here she is in the co-host chair. So, you know, y'all have something in common there. Books as well. Lindsey is also a librarian. So if she's a lover of books. And before I get back to her, I have to ask you if you're reading childhood books. So can you pick out a childhood book that like really defined you or that you were really into as a kid? Maybe like one of the first ones that really you identified with.
Oh, there's so many, but also there's only one answer. And that would be The Ancient One by T.A. Barron.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. How old were you when you read that?
Oh, I mean, I still have my copy of it. I still technically I haven't reread it in several years, but I still have it. I don't know how old I was when I found it, but it's basically fictional Crater Lake is the setting. And I grew up in Oregon. And so I don't know. I'm sure that it was handed to me because it was set in the Pacific Northwest. And then I read a bunch of other stuff by T.A. Barron.
Okay. My ears are perked up.
So on your podcast, are you talking about the show and the books or just the books?
Mainly the books. We have done show discussions, but we tend to silo those off onto their own separate episodes and really create a lot of separation there. And we're mainly the books. Yeah.
It's a good question because I got into like the Wheel of Time and I kind of put my foot into like the TV show community because I noticed there was a big lack of that and nobody was really recapping it. You know, there were people recapping it, but not to my liking. So I had to do it my own way. So I don't do the books, even though I have had some book discussions. Book discussion now, though, Lindsey, is to you because you're a librarian and I know you specialize in young adult, but you as a young adult, what was your first like love of book when you started reading?
Well, when you say young adult, I'm thinking teen. So,
Okay. So go back in time further.
Is that what you're asking? Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking kids?
Yeah, like the first like books that you remember like really identifying with, like this is Lindsey Dunn style right here.
Well, when I was young, I used to like to read I don't remember what they were called, but there was like the pink book of fairy tales, the purple book of fairy tales, the blue book of fairy tales.
Oh, yeah. I had the blue one. Yeah.
But I wanted to read the whole collection and would go to the library to get those. But a big book from my childhood is The Enormous Crocodile by Roald Dahl.
Sure.
I don't know what that says about me, but I just liked it was a very fantastical story about a crocodile that wants to eat children. And he's doing all of these different tricks and gets foiled by different animals. And he meets all the animals that are in the beginning of the book, but then he's trying to do these sort of nasty tricks, nasty plans and nasty tricks he talks about to be able to eat these children. And when every step of the way, he's foiled by a different animal. And I just loved the different animals, the way that they would talk, and I created voices for each of them. And I read that book to my nieces and nephews every chance I get. Like all of them are subjected to it, and all of them find out what happens to the crocodile at the end. So
I was into James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. That was like a book that as a little Stevie I was really into. And I remember like when we like had to write books like in first and second grade, I wrote a direct ripoff of James and the Giant Peach. I think it was like, Sean and the Giant Strawberry or something like that. So I dug that a lot too. The books I remember most reading in like elementary school for me would be like The Mouse and the Motorcycle, everything by Beverly Cleary, like Super Fudge. And
yeah.
After a while, I started getting into Stephen King real quickly, like fifth grade. But before that, it was definitely like Encyclopedia Brown, Mouse and the Motorcycle, Beverly Cleary. That was my gang right there. But movies too. This movie, I chose it because this movie really impacted me a lot as a kid. It came out in 1981. So the first time I saw it, I was less than 10 years old. And it made a huge impact on me, more so than I realized at the time, because I was having these reoccurring dreams, you would call them nightmares, about being in the desert. And I came upon this big mirror and I threw a rock at the mirror and there was a world inside of the mirror. And like, I thought that was me that made that up, but it wasn't. It was just a reflection of this movie. And I remember as a like 10, 11, had a fever one time. And so I was having like real fever kind of visions, hallucinations while I was sick. And one of those visions was a bunch of men around my bed, like jostling me and trying to like, rouse me out of bed, just like the opening scene of Time Bandits. And of course, I didn't make the connection that it came from this film until like years later. Then as a teenage drug user, I was like doing psychedelics and I was watching this movie and it made like a different impression on me and it was putting different things into my mind, affected me in different kinds of ways. So I've seen this movie so many times and it's really gotten into my psyche. So again, with the book question, I just revealed like what my big movie was when I was a kid. It's Time Bandits. I'm going to go reverse. I'm going to go back to you, Lindsey. Do you remember like a movie that you might have seen that really stuck in your craw like as a kid and really stuck in your head a lot?
Yeah, I think that the movies I remember, one of the first ones that I really got into was E.T.
Sure,
And
yes.
but I was a very lonely child. I had my books and I had my sisters, but I didn't have a lot of friends. So for me, it was thinking how nice it would be to have a friend like E.T. who would just make
A
you
magic
laugh.
friend.
And who would be there for you. I'll be right there. I mean, his key phrase is like, he's going to be there for you no matter what. And also not just he's there for you, but he also represents that there's more out there in the world than we can see with our own eyes. So that was a big movie. But then there's a lot of movies that are kind of in the same vein as this movie that were big movies for me, like Willow and Neverending Story, and
Sure.
anything that it kind of makes me surprised that how did I not see this movie at some point? But maybe for my parents, this was a step too far. I don't know.
How about you, Aradia? I'm not sure of your age, but I mean, maybe you can reveal your age to us now by telling us what movie you saw. Like, because me and Lindsey, obviously, it's 80s movies. Like, what are some of the earliest movies that you saw that stuck with you? I have a feeling they're the same ones.
Oh, well, I'm a 90s baby.
Okay.
And most of my favorite movies from that period of my life are animation. I don't do animation now so much, but when I think of my favorite movies, they're all animated. And the two that stand out most are Fern Gully and Brave Little Toaster. Those two movies both deeply scarred and traumatized me. I had a deep desire to fly like Krista, and I was catastrophically heartbroken when the costume that my mom made me did not impart the powers of flight. I'm actually still mad about that. I'm never going to get over it. And the Brave Little Toaster is a fantastic movie, but my God, have I had so many nightmares with that freaking the magnet at the end? Like, so many nightmares about the magnet at the end. And weirdly, so okay, I got to talk about the movie, the Time Bandits, for just a second, because
of course,
for the longest time, I had this weird nightmare about the end of this movie. Like the end scene was frozen in my head as a nightmare, and I didn't know where it came from. And you asked me about this movie, and
okay.
I was like, is that the movie where there's the coal in the microwave, and then the parents die? Is that just like, am I just and watching this movie, getting to the end and being like, I fucking knew it. I fucking remember. I don't even know when I saw this movie, but like that is a scene that has haunted my dreams for so many years. Wild experience to watch this movie and see all these other little fragments of nightmare fuel that I never knew where they came from. They're all from this movie. Okay.
Yes, you got that in common with me. I'm sad to say that I don't know your movies. Yeah. I've heard of them. I've heard of Fern Gully, and it's funny that you mentioned the Brave Little Toaster because, right, I was an adult in the 90s. I didn't have any children at that time, so I was like a young adult in the 90s. And when the Brave Little Toaster came out, I was working at this place called Stuffy's, and we had toasters there. And so we were aware of this movie, but none of us had seen it. So it was always a joke like, go to the Brave Little Toaster over there and see if he can handle a steak and cheese sub. Or that was like just like a regular joke that we would talk about. But I've never actually seen the movie. So I don't know if seeing it now would be good, but I do have an 18-year-old daughter that is really into watching kid movies.
It is weird.
Okay.
No, Brave Little Toaster is bizarre and intense. It's like Homeward Bound, but with appliances.
Okay.
And then Fern Gully is Avatar, but not in space. Avatar, the blue people on the planet with the unobtainium. Imagine that, but on Earth, and it's Fern Gully.
Okay. I mean, you sold me on Brave Little Toaster, not sure on Fern Gully, but at least for Charlotte's sake.
No, Fern Gully has no good ending.
Watch.
It's just very pretty. No, I just love Fern Gully because it's pretty. It has no ending at all. Avatar did a better job with the wrapping the story up.
I'm a stickler for that.
Not the movie we're here to
talk about. If a movie doesn't have an ending or if the ending is weird or like, I don't know, like I'm a stickler for endings. It has to have an ending. That's how I am.
Well, you'll like Brave Little Toaster then. That is a good ending.
I'm with it. All righty. I'm ready to get into the details of the movie. You guys good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All righty. So my basic details are this movie was written by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, produced by George Harrison of the Beatles and Dennis O'Brien. These two guys have been business partners since the Beatles, and they mortgaged their office to finance this movie for a budget of $5 million. Spent 4 weeks at number one. It made $62 million. It's one of the top 10 movies of 1981. And the tagline is, I mean, we can all agree with this, it's all the dreams you've ever had and not just the good ones. This movie definitely gave kids nightmares. So his vision, Terry Gilliam's vision for this movie was a family film written from the kids' point of view. He took influence from Wizard of Oz and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Arthur Dent, being like in his night clothes, was a big influence on Kevin being in his night clothes throughout a large portion of this movie. So the low budget required practical shots, forced perspectives, and model work. In the forced perspective, Terry Gilliam used that to his advantage because he wanted to have a film with a child star centered around a kid, but have adults with him, but he wanted the adults to be about the same size as the kid for a perspective. So he shot everything lower, and that's kind of the reason, that he used actors of shorter stature in this film. So yeah, a $5 million budget. To me, this does not look like a $5 million budget film. And Lindsey, I'm going to go to you on this one. What did you think about the budget and the practical and special effects of this thing?
I am not a numbers person, so I don't know when you say 5 million, is that considered low or high?
Very low, considering all the extras, all the sets, all the stunts, all the set pieces, locations, flying everybody to all these different locations. $5 million is nothing, basically.
Yeah, I'm sure for its time, it was probably pretty exciting to see walls moving and explosions and things that were different, things that were oversized. And yeah.
Did any of that stuff stand out to you or make a big impression on you, Lindsey?
I think if I had seen this movie at a different time in my life, it might have been exciting. But now I think most of those things are pretty normal for what you would see, and maybe even, these are practical effects, so they're probably, you can tell they're manufactured or man-made, as opposed to like digital special effects and how they come out looking very smooth and even. This, obviously has some rough spots to it, but that's sort of its charm. It kind of makes it Muppets, kind of like the way that Muppets special effects is.
Sure.
I think one of the moments that kind of really impressed me was when they're in the cages and then they're swinging on the ropes, and how that was probably a pretty elaborately put together with all of the swinging and the perspective as the guy swings back on the rope, and you're just wondering, is he gonna die? is anybody who's gonna die during this scene? Probably at least one person.
Looking like Wally to me personally, but how about you, Aradia? Any of this stuff stand out to you, or what do you think about that budget number?
I mean, I am also not a numbers person. I have no idea what it costs to make a movie. I can tell just from looking at it that it's clearly they were stretching their money a really long way. Like, you can just tell the expansiveness of the cast and the sets and the practicalness of the effects. You're like, okay, whatever their budget was, they were making every dollar count. Like, truly.
Yeah.
I love practical effects. I love how they age in a very different way than computer effects. And some of them were really, really appropriate, like using reverse colors to like represent transitioning like through the dimensions was like, yeah, I mean, you don't really need anything else. Just reverse the colors. Boom. And it's also delightfully dated. I mean, there's something just absolutely charming about the little rectangles just opening in the sky, and the face that's like 8-bit resolution, like chasing them down a hallway. There's something just charming about it that's like not charming about like 2010s like CGI. It's like 2010 CGI, but like The practical effects, I'm like sitting there wondering, like, how did they practically do that? Like, it's fun. I enjoy it. But also, it was clear that they were doing a lot of duct tape and chewing gum and hope and a prayer to like make that happen.
Yeah, he really stretched the budget. I guess I can tell y'all from my perspective, I did a small role on, that wasn't even a role. I was a background person on a television show. And I worked for 3 days and I got paid more than $1,000 just for 3 days. And there was about 200 of us that were doing this. So that's $200,000 just for the extras. That doesn't include like the 30 trucks full of equipment and all the guys who are running around doing all that stuff. The big actors, doesn't include Michael Keaton's salary, doesn't include everything we were. So just us extras that were just hanging around doing nothing cost $200,000. And I know they had more than that many extras in this film. So I wonder who got paid and how much they got paid. I don't think a lot of people walked away from this money very rich, except for George Harrison and Dennis O'Brien. I'll go a little bit into how they spent some of this money. First off, the move of... Okay, I changed my mind there. I'm not going to talk about how they spent this money. I'm going to talk about the actors and our stars of this movie, the Time Bandits. So this was a very progressive move back in 1981 to put all these actors of shorter stature front and center in starring roles, because these guys were all used to playing background roles as actors, hidden behind masks and costumes, usually, playing not the roles that they actually want to be playing. And they wanted the lead character, Kevin, to be considered an equal to the Time Bandits, so they chose to use these actors of shorter stature. So the film's producers were against this ending that we were talking about, the coal in the microwave, Kevin's parents blowing up. George Harrison and Dennis O'Brien were like really against that. And they were against the scene with Vermin eating the rat as well. Terry Gilliam obnoxiously stood up for his film and threatened to burn the negatives. He lost pretty much all of his friendships after this film because he burnt his bridges being such a stubborn jerk. However, the reason that he kept these things in the film is because when they test screened it for kids, these are the two things that the kids liked the most. They said they liked when the parents got blown up. They liked when the guy ate the rat. So he insisted on keeping these things in the film because he's like, this film is for kids. This is what the kids like. So this is going to stay in the film. Not knowing how traumatic these things actually were, perhaps. These are like, 1979 kids, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, any comments about any of that so far?
Well, I know for a fact that I do not like Terry Gilliam's work. Every movie of his I've watched.
Okay.
His style of humor is not what does it for me. My husband loves his stuff, like adores everything we've watched of his. I hate it. And it's just like, it's one of those, it's not bad, it's just not for me. So I'm not surprised to hear that he stood up for the ending that I hate so much. That tracks a lot. And just on a separate topic, it's interesting that you say it was progressive that they were having the little people given like authentic roles in a sense, as opposed to what they'd experienced before. Because I kept looking at it being like, are they doing like weird stuff for laughs in a way that's laughing at them, or are we laughing with them? Like the movie kept treading that line to me, which means that it probably was actually pretty fucking progressive for 1981.
Right.
In England, no less.
I mean, these Beverly Cleary progressive books we were reading, like some of the stuff you read, like in the most progressive books from the 70s and 80s, they were still calling people fat and stupid and like F slurs and stuff. Even the most progressive minds in the 80s still weren't quite all there yet. So, yeah, this was considered very progressive. And these guys, were ecstatic to have these roles because they were, higher paying roles than they usually get.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I was just looking up what year Willow came out, because I think that's a further step in that spectrum. That came out in 1988. So you had, Willow Ufgood and his people. They were definitely even more heroic, and I feel like they had more character development than maybe these characters. And I listened to you in another podcast, your old episode, Steve, talking about how these were progressive roles and how the people were excited. And I was kind of like, I mean, I feel like they still were kind of being used as objects of ridicule in some ways,
Sure.
but maybe less than in the past. But I did want to comment also on this thing about the children as test subjects, and we need to keep these things in here because kids like them.
Right.
I do find that really interesting, and maybe not what you would normally test, because I would think that a director would be kind of test driving the adult reactions, because in the end, it's going to be the adults that sort of determine how much money you make, because they're the ones that will decide if the movie will be bought or if they will take their kids to it. So the fact that they were saying, this is what the kids like, that I do think that's an interesting approach that maybe was a little bit different, but I think Terry Gilliam is a very different person. But that's just an interesting fact that they brought it. And I'm like, and I honestly don't even remember rat eating happening in this movie. So now I'm like shocked about that. And I was like, where was I when that happened?
It was the cage scene you referenced earlier.
I get, maybe I was too scared about if they were going to fall or not to notice anybody eating a rat.
Yeah. One of the other things I noticed about the actors is the lead actor, whose name I'm already forgetting, the character's name, but David Rappaport, Randall. I recognize him from my mom's favorite movie of all time, which came out just a few years later, which is The Bride, with Sting as Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's David Rappaport and Clancy Brown. It's Clancy Brown's breakout movie. And they play an amazing pair. And it's my mom's favorite movie of all time. And so I was kind of shocked when David Rappaport's name wasn't in the opening credits. I was like,
right.
But it's David Rappaport. And then I looked it up, and no, The Bride came out in 1985. This movie is part of why he's in The Bride and gets his name in big letters across the front of The Bride, is because he did this. And I was just... Yep. It was surprising. I was pleased to see him in another movie because he's a very fun actor.
It's funny you mentioned that, the opening credits, because the reason the opening credits are the way they are is because they wanted to put all the cameos of the big stars out front. And they did it in alphabetical order. They didn't do it like an order of appearance. They did an ABC order. And then after all those big star cameos, that's when they listed like Craig Warnock, David Rappaport, etc. So that's why you saw those big stars at the beginning of the film. So yeah. I want to go back to the Terry Gilliam thing, because like you said, you're not a huge fan. Our past guest, Scott, when he found out we were doing this, he's like, boo, Terry Gilliam, I hate the guy. It's a common theme. In interviews, Terry is often referred to as rude, overbearing, difficult to work with. Michael Palin calls him a old silly bitch. He has lost most of his friendships due to his stubbornness. Although every member of the troupe praises his vision, his creativity, his work ethic, and his ability to produce high-quality films. So a little half and half for you there. They recognize he's a smart guy, but he sucks.
Right. Artists, man. Artists are so rough. Artists are so difficult.
Even the great ones. I mean, I'm a big fan of this guy, just like your husband, and I like everything he's done. And we were talking about some of the other films that he's done. This movie is part of a trilogy, and this is the first trilogy from the kids' point of view. The second film of the trilogy is Brazil, written from a middle-aged man's point of view. And then the third film is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So it's written from an old man's point of view. And all these situations are, men having these fantastical adventures through time. So yeah, I wanted to go to some of these sets that he built. He had a shoddy set. This is an example of Terry Gilliam's assholeness. They had a shoddy stunt set built in the forest for Sherwood Forest when the gang falls onto Vincent and Pansy. And so the crew was reluctant to jump on the thing because it just looked so crappy. So Terry Gilliam took it upon himself to get up on the thing and then jump off of it. And he landed on Shelley Duvall's head and injured her for the rest of the working day. So she wasn't able to work the rest of the day because dumbass was trying to prove it was safe and then fell on her head. Weirdly enough, a similar incident happened on the television show while they were filming it to Charlene Yee. Apparently, while they were filming, there was an actor that was being a little too aggressive during the scene. And she later, filed a suit against him. The actor is unnamed, but she is not returning to the show because of this incident. And this has nothing to do with Terry Gilliam. It was just a random occurrence that happened on set. And it's just like a nice little nod back to the 1981 days of Terry Gilliam and his crappy sets, I guess.
Weird.
Yeah. So another thing about Gilliam's, I have one more Gilliam bastard talk. He didn't want to use George Harrison's music for the movie, even though George Harrison financed the movie and mortgaged his own office to do it. He didn't want to use his music. This frustrated George Harrison. Of course, he insisted that you got to use my song for the end of the film, which he did. A song called Dream Away, written by George Harrison. The lyrics, however, they mirror Harrison's feelings about Terry Gilliam. So some of the lines of this song, it says, greedy feeling, wheeling and dealing, losing all that you have won, seeing your dreams come undone, stumble you may with the elementary, lucky you got so far, all you owe me is apologies. And Harrison has later said that the whole stanza is all about Terry Gilliam.
Damn. Ouch.
I mean, biting the hand that feeds you. This is like the money man. And so yeah, I mentioned how this is part of a trilogy. And one of y'all, I'm not sure who, talked about how it, kind of stood up to the test of time. And that's what I wanted to ask. I'm going to go to you, Lindsey. I haven't heard from you in a while. Does this movie work now or not?
My experience in watching this is my first time ever. Okay. So it's my first time ever. And I felt like, I want to go back to the beginning, which I was watching it. It reminded me of many movies that I really like, Never Ending Story, Willow, different things like that. And I thought, I found myself laughing and enjoying it and thinking, oh, this is kind of like before Bill and Ted. It's kind of the original Bill and Ted, because it's time travel, but also you're kind of visiting the greatest moments of history. Sure. And I had that thought as soon as we landed first upon Napoleon, which I thought was really hilarious, because we just had the Napoleon movie last year, which I did not like at all. But yeah, this Napoleon was much more entertaining in Time Bandits than that Napoleon was.
Oh, wow.
I thought the Napoleon movie was really bad, but I'm not talking about Napoleon. We are talking about Time Bandits. To put in a Steve Barnesism here. I thought that the movie in some ways was a little long for me. Overall, I think that was my experience, is that if you had shaved off 20 minutes of this movie,
sure,
I think it could have worked, because especially the last segment, I feel it was way too long. The whole part before the Supreme Being finally shows up, that whole battle scene was really played out. But yeah, I got bored, and also during the ship scene and the ogre scene. So
okay. Yeah.
For me, it did not. I think if I had watched it when I was younger, I would have been a lot more entranced by it. But I found myself feeling distracted and kind of, when is this going to end? Because I had actually seen in another movie I saw this year, a documentary where it was a retrospective of all these Christian themes in films. And they show the scene at the end where the kid says, why do we have, what does he say? Why do we have evil? Why does evil exist? Mm-hmm. And he gets this very pat answer. Yeah, that moment was seen it. I was like, when are we going to get to that scene where they kind of talk about philosophy? Well, it wasn't till the end, and it really didn't go into it much. But
sure.
I think for me, in order for this movie to work, what you're talking about, would it stand the test of time, would be for it to be just a little bit shorter, and for there to be some extension of the ideas beyond just, we're going on this great adventure. Like if they had sort of explored those themes about, what is the big through line of this movie? I think all the movies I really still like that are of this type, they sort of do that. They take those moments to breathe and kind of reflect on what we're looking at, and you sort of take an idea home. But for me, I'm assuming we're able to do spoilers here, so sure. I can just talk about anything. Okay, so the fact that, at first I was like, as we're watching this kid, at first he's just kind of going along with everything. He has these disinterested parents. He's longing for adventure. So he goes on all these adventures with his new friends. And at first he's just kind of going along with stuff and he's enjoying the idea of just, I'm going to be with these time bandits, whatever. But after a while, he starts to be the one to sort of say, no, guys, that's not right. We need to do this. We need to do the right thing. Like, we're going to stay. He tries to save his friends. Like when that one guy is drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah. When that one guy is trying to drown, even though he's actually sort of checked out and wanting to do something, he's not going to let his friend perish. So he sort of becomes the leader and he's like, hey, listen to me, guys. This is what we need to do. And so then I'm like, oh, this kid's sort of coming out of this thing a better person somehow. But then the ending is just so not, I'm like, what is this? It's
right.
Why did it end?
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't understand that. It's like, maybe he could have talked to his parents or let them see the light of day. And I was like, there's a fire and the boy's parents just blew up and we're okay with that. Okay. I guess he's going to go on to get adopted by somebody or go into the foster care system.
I don't think we're okay with that. I think it's just to show the kid is smarter than his parents, basically.
I did enjoy that the blender that they're using looks a lot like a new blender that's on the market now called the Beast that I really want because it's sort of mid-century vibes. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. If you want a mid-century vibes blender that looks like Time Bandits, look for the Beast.
All right. Put it on your Amazon wish list. Now, Aradia, you saw this as a kid and then you saw it as an adult. So I'm sure it was a different experience for you. How was your test of time with Time Bandits?
I mean, in a word, no, it does not hold up to the test of time. In a word. It's way too disjointed. It makes no sense at the end. The physics are ridiculous. And the audio they did this thing, which became not a thing, like I think in the early 90s, because I don't really recall it being much of a thing by the time we get to the 2000s, which is having a whole audio gag track running. It's almost like a laugh track, but it's like an audio gag track. These weird little boing, doing, like wet noises and like bouncy noises and like stuff like that illustrates the gags. And I feel like by the time you get to movies made in the 2000s, like that is gone. It's just completely gone. But there's this, it's really disjointed and awkward because you can tell the sounds are not being made in the same room and they are not synchronized to the visuals like at all. And yeah, there's a bunch of like, especially as you get to the end, like the vignettes stop having any connection to each other and like stop making sense. But then there's also these really fun parts, like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing. So the Napoleon scene, the whole Napoleon thing, I'm watching Napoleon and I'm like, that's Vito Cornelius from The Fifth Element. Like, holy shit, how did I not know that? The Fifth Element is my favorite movie of all time. I watched it long after I was a kid, but it is my favorite movie of all time, is The Fifth Element. I can quote the entire movie. And I have to watch it once a year. It's a whole deal. But like central comedic guide character, if you're not familiar, is played by Ian Holm. And I go to check his IMDb just to make sure, because I don't know people's names. I just recognize their faces. And he's way younger because it's like 10 years almost apart. More than 10 years apart, because Fifth Element comes out in 95. And it turns out he's also Bilbo Baggins.
That's right.
I had never connected that Ian Holm is Vito Cornelius and Bilbo Baggins. I had no idea Bilbo Baggins and Vito Cornelius were the same person. Like, mind blown. Anyway, his performance as Napoleon is standout. And I think that's the really fun thing about this movie, is that there are parts of it that are amazing. But the parts that don't work, like, are way too common. And like, it's just, and again, I don't like Terry Gilliam, so it's hard for me to say what of it is just, it doesn't stand the test of time, and what is, I don't like his art. Like, I think there is a period vibe to his art that there's a lot of overlap on that Venn diagram. But I think, it's a fun movie to watch as long as you're not expecting it to stand up to modern standards. If you're into going back in time, it's fine. But it's weird.
I mean, I agree with everything y'all said. It could use some editing. It would make me sad to see some of these scenes edited down, because I love like the film for nostalgia reasons. But yeah, I can totally see a good 20, 25 minutes cut out of this thing. So I can agree with you there. Let's see. You did make a point, Aradia, that I wanted to pick up on. Oh yeah, the cast. I think that's the strength of this movie is the cast. It's like every single person in this movie is recognizable, and that lends it some credence, and that gives it some showability as well. You know, if somebody is a fan of a certain actor, you can say, "Oh, check out his small role he did in Time Bandits." And if you don't want to watch the whole movie, you can just go to YouTube and say, you know, Time Bandits, you know, John Price scene, and you'll get that scene on YouTube. Thanks to all the nerds out there.
I mean, there's a lot of Sean Connery leg to be observed. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I can't wait to get to the Sean Connery. That's what I'm getting ready to do right now is go into our actors. So yeah, do you mind if I go ahead and segue into our actors now?
Go for it.
Yeah, that's fine, Steve. Just know I do have some like fun things I enjoyed at some point in the movie. If we can talk about that. I know you'll allow for that, but
I was gonna go through the actors, and then I was gonna go through our different set scenes, like different places that we visited. But I mean, if you wanted to jump the gun and like shout out one right now, I'm definitely not against that.
Well, it's just like there were certain things I enjoyed about the movie, so I'll throw out one. But yes, I have a few things.
Okay.
One thing I was really interested in was this Polaroid camera that he had. He had, pilfered from his parents. And he seemed to be really able to take a lot of photos with that thing. And I was really curious about that. And I had looked up, it seems that there were only 8 photos in a Polaroid film pack. So I'm curious how many film packs he managed to grab to go into the past, because it seemed like he had a never-ending supply of, but there were only 8 photos in a Polaroid film pack. So he must have grabbed quite a supply, because I don't think you can get refills in the past.
No, you have to buy like a whole new pack. That's right. And yeah, I like the way they showed us some of those pictures later in the film. It almost reminded me of like, I wonder if that's where they got the idea from Hangover from. That was really fun, like on The Hangover. Not my favorite movie. I love the end credits when they show like all the pictures that the guys took during their adventures. So I'm a big fan of that. And I wonder if they got that from this film, like with the pictures throughout. I think it's a neat premise too. But yeah, we'll go through the scenes in a minute, but let's go through our people. Our big boy is Craig Warnock. He's the guy who plays Kevin, and he did not audition for the role. His brother auditioned for the role, and his brother is like a cute actor that, is very boisterous, and the casting director took a shining to quiet Craig in the corner, not really saying so much, just being like intellectually curious. So that's how they hired him. He later went on, Cynthia. Why do I almost call you Cynthia, Lindsay? Because I'm saying synth music. Craig Warnock went on to become a synth music artist from the band These Animal Men. He was their keyboard player. For our Time Bandits, we got David Rappaport. He is Randall, the self-appointed leader. We got Kenny Baker. He plays Fidget. And of course, he's R2-D2. That's his claim to fame. He was also a stage comedian, and he had a comedy partner named Jack Purvis. Jack Purvis is also in this film. He plays Wally, who's like the biggest of the Time Bandits. Wally also starred in Brazil as well. Malcolm Dixon plays Strutter. Mike Edmonds plays Og. You got Tim Ross as Vermin. And then for our 7th Time Bandit, there's only 6 Time Bandits, but they had 7 in the original script. The 7th one was Horseflesh. They talk about Horseflesh every now and then. Horseflesh, the actor, can be seen. He's one of the evil henchmen. He's like the evil henchman that's of shorter stature as well. He's played by Marcus Powell.
Him.
Yeah. The reason he couldn't join the gang as a Time Bandit is because Disney had a copyright on anything involving 7 dwarves because of Snow White and the 7 Dwarves.
Oh, fuck off.
That's exactly why they didn't use Horseflesh as the 7th. So they instead gave him another role. And so we have the 6 Time Bandits instead. Aradia, speak your feelings on that.
Disney, go juggle something. God, why you gotta be so
even back in 81
proprietary about stuff? Jeez. Anyway.
So this group of guys, they already knew each other, or at least 6 of them knew each other. They had all been playing roles together in Star Wars, Flash Gordon, The Dark Crystal, etc. 6 of them, not David Rappaport. He's the guy you were talking about earlier. David Rappaport was more of a Shakespearean stage actor. He got the role and he saw himself as above the other guys. He didn't get the role because he's of shorter stature. He got the roles because he's a better actor than everybody else. And he acted as such. Therefore, he was very disliked by everybody on the cast, especially the other Time Bandits. They were not a fan of his and they did not work with him after this. So he also burned some bridges during this movie, our boy Randall. He not only acted like a jerk in the movie, he did that in real life too. It came easy to him.
That matches the on-screen chemistry.
Yeah, it really does, especially like when they get to yell at him and be all mad at him. I bet that was real easy to do. So there was a book that was written. It was called Monty Python, The Case Against Irreverence, Scrutinality, Profanity. I don't know. There's a long title with a bunch of big words that I can't pronounce. It was written by Michael Hewison. Let's just say it was the Monty Python, The Case Against book. So he says in this book that it was revealed that the 6 Time Bandits represent the 6 members of the Monty Python troupe. They say that Fidget, the nice one, represents Sir Michael Palin. Randall, the self-appointed leader, represents John Cleese. Strutter, the Acerric one, represents Eric Idle. Og, the quiet one who never talks, represents Graham Chapman. Wally, the noisy rebel, represents Terry Jones. And Vermin, the nasty, filthy one, represents Terry Gilliam, of course. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what was written in this book. And he says that that was something that was discussed during the writing of the film. Time Bandits 2 was supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen in 1996. And the premise of that movie was the Time Bandits are now older men. Michael Rappaport and Ross had already passed away at this point.
David Rappaport.
Excuse me?
David Rappaport.
Oh, I said Michael Rappaport. Yeah, not that dude. He's funny. David Rappaport. He had passed away, and so had Ross. But Jack Purvis was still alive, but he was in a paralyzed state. But he had agreed to be written into the script in that state as he was going to be in the film as part of that condition. But when he passed away, he eventually passed away in 96. They had lost 3 of their Time Bandits. They decided to scrap the whole idea. So there will not be a Time Bandits 2. So the whole thing was shelved. Now we have hopes that there's going to be a Time Bandit show starting in July 2024, even though they're not showing us any trailers or any lead ups to it. But I'm eagerly awaiting this show because I love the movie so much and I love the guys who are running the show. I don't have it written here. I've discussed it before, but the fellas from Flight of the Conchord and What We Do in the Shadows, that team is going to be doing the Time Bandit show. So I have a lot of faith in those guys. Anything before I get on to our cameos?
Yeah, you were mentioning the TV series.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's no trailer, but I was thinking, okay, so we have a character playing Kevin. So we know there's going to be a Kevin.
Yes.
There's also a character, Lisa Kudrow, playing Penelope. And is this going to be the same Penelope from the movie that's going to be a rando cameo?
I don't know. None of the names match up. There's a character named not Fidget, but Widget. That's the only other one that matches up. There are 4 actors of shorter stature that are in the TV show cast, but they're not the main Time Bandits. Yeah. I guess they're I don't know.
Yeah. The only other thing I can pull out here is there's a character playing Nikita Kronos is playing a character named Xanthus. And Xanthus is a character from Greek mythology. So they're definitely going to be going to Greece. So you could possibly look at some of these character names and speculate the different locations they'll be traveling to, but that's the only one. There was another one that says Queen Inari, and I was hoping that would be an established character, but I'm not finding anything in Google. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. When is the show supposed to start, Steve?
July 24th. And we're doing our first podcast July 29th, James and myself. And from what I understand, Jermaine Clement had an interview and he said that each episode focuses on a different period of time. So yeah, like you said, I guess one episode will be Greek and then who knows where they're going to go or how long this could last. I hope it does though. I'm looking forward to it. I'm banking on it here.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Sean Connery and how it was cool he was in this. It's interesting that Sean Connery is in this because when they wrote the script, they didn't expect to get Sean Connery. When they wrote the script, they said that the king Agamathion takes off his helm and he's a guy that looks like Sean Connery. That's what it said in the script. We want a guy that looks like Sean Connery. Dennis O'Brien, who's one of the producers of the film, is a golf buddy with Sean Connery. And he told him this little snippet of information. And Sean Connery was like, hey, I'll do it. Sure, I'll work for Scale. All these guys worked for Scale. So like they didn't make any money doing this.
That's great.
And it was Sean Connery's idea to show up as a fireman later on. Like Terry Gilliam took some of these actors' ideas and put them into the film, as I'll go into here. So we got Sean Connery. We got David Warner. He played Evil. He also played the villains on Tron and Time After Time. Jonathan Pryce was supposed to be Evil, if y'all know who Jonathan Pryce is. He instead was the lead character in Terry Gilliam's next film, Brazil. Brazil had even a smaller budget, and it had even weirder stunts that they had to do, even more dangerous stunts than they had to do on Time Bandits. And Jonathan Pryce was not exactly hip to all of it, did a lot of complaining on set. And apparently, Terry Gilliam would tell him that this was punishment for saying no to Time Bandits. So he apparently punished him for his next role for saying no. So he doesn't hold grudges, I guess, right? We talked about Ian Holm. He's Napoleon for us here. Peter Vaughn is Winston the Ogre, and Katherine Hellman, who I believe that's the lady from Who's the Boss. Is that right? She plays Mona?
Mm-hmm. Mona.
Yeah, she's Miss Ogre. They were going to make a ogre as his wife, but they decided last minute maybe it was a budget cut. They decided to be funny if the ogre's wife was just a normal woman instead of an ogre. So that's why they cast her just as herself. We got Jim Barrowan as the game show host. Michael Palin is Sir Vincent. And then we got Jonathan Cleese as Robin Hood. I think it's a pretty standout role. That's like the role that's like my dad's favorite scene in the film is the Robin Hood scene with John Cleese and when the guy punches people. Guys, I don't know. Shelley Duvall plays Pansy. Ralph Richardson plays a supreme being, and he took his role very seriously. He's another guy that changed lines and he made suggestions for the film that made it into the film, including the whole trash bin sequence where everybody had to go clean up the trash and put it in a trash bin. That was Ralph Richardson's idea. And then the parents, we got David Dakar as Kevin's dad. Sheila Kay is his mom. So yeah, we got all these characters here. I just told you my dad's favorite was Robin Hood. Did y'all have a favorite character from the show? I'll let y'all decide who goes first. Or silence is fine too.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you weren't done talking about the characters. I would have never brought up the show stuff. So I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize you weren't done with that.
Oh, that's okay. I do it to you all the time, Lindsay. I always, on your podcast, I say stuff at the wrong time every time. So it's fine.
I mean, I think I already said I liked Napoleon. I thought he was really funny. I liked him. And also, and the evil guy, because I was like, oh, it's nice to see him. David Warner, I guess.
Yeah.
I've seen him in many movies, but I think a lot of people might know him best as the kind of the henchman in Titanic. And so, in that he kind of maybe he plays a lot of evil roles. A lot.
I remember him as always being evil. I don't remember him from Titanic at all.
He's the one that, he would follow around Kate Winslet's fiance everywhere on the boat and be trying to catch Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay. With that face of his, like,
he had like a bowler hat that he was wearing, one of those bowler hats that indicates pure evil.
Sure. How about you, Aradia? Anybody stand out to you?
Remind me which one of the Monty Python guys it is that played Vincent. Is that?
Oh, that would be Michael Palin, who's also the writer and producer of the film.
See, I love Monty Python collectively, and he is who I like the most. I love everything, his entire physique. Him and what's her name? Pansy. The little vignette of the two of them twice is it's such a gem because it's so hard to commit that hard to being that campy, like truly. And there's just like everything he does, I find charming. And she matches his energy like to such a high degree that I love the two vignettes of them. They just like make me so happy. They're so fucking stupid. I love them.
I love the way she overacts the whole time. She's like her facial
It's
expressions and the things
amazing.
she's saying.
Her eyes like are rolling back in her head, and like I just like it's a true talent to be able to go that hard. So yeah, I mean, I already talked about Ian Holm and David Rappaport. So yeah, that everything he does, and then the fact that she was able to match his energy, just love that.
I should point out too that that my wife hates this film. Like she has no interest in this film at all. She didn't want to rewatch it. And she she just refers to it as my stupid film that I'm into or what. She doesn't like anything I'm into, really. I'm surprised that we do have a consensus of things we do like. But yeah, she refused to even entertain the thought of watching this with me, which I really wanted her to. She did not. So I appreciate you two doing that where she could not. You hear that, Heather? Okay.
All the way from the hotel. She's hearing it right
Shots
now.
Fired.
She listens to this podcast. She knows I'm shit talking her. All right. Okay, we had, a few different sets that we went to. They filmed in Morocco, Wales, the Kent Coast, the Epping Forest, not Sherwood Forest, and then, of course, in the International Film Studio in London. The film score was by Michael Moran, and he had these different orchestra cues matched up for each time period, like classical music for Napoleon, this dark, menacing music for evil. The whole score took 21 days, and this guy, Mike Moran, went on to write songs with Freddie Mercury later on in his career. So, he became a cool dude. If he's hanging out with the Queen, he's got to be. So, in this film, we meet young Kevin. He enjoys studying history. In particular, he likes ancient Greece, and his parents are more interested in consumerism and buying the latest appliances. One night at bedtime, a knight bursts through Kevin's wall, and Kevin notices a picture of that knight on his wall later. And you can see on his wall, there's also pictures of ancient Greece. There's pictures of Napoleon, pictures of the ship. There's pictures of all the places that Kevin later goes and visits. On his floor, of course, is his toys, and his toy set, of course, later on becomes the Fortress of Solitude, or whatever they call it. The evil. They have these really campy names for everything too. That's really fun.
Fortress of Ultimate Darkness, I think, is what it was. There was
there
something
you
about
go.
Ultimate Darkness in there.
So metal. Yes.
Yeah.
So the next night, Kevin is ready with his Polaroid, as Lindsey points out. The Time Bandits appear, and the Supreme Being quickly chases behind them, and they chase them through the wall. He demands that they return the map, which I have to point out the map, Lindsey. This is a time travel movie, and we've got a map. And I know that there's a specific map that we have in our show, Dark. And if you look at all the different stuff they do in Dark and the different formulas that they use, the terms that they're using, everything kind of makes sense. And you can look at the graffiti on the walls and everything's tied in. But you look at this map of the Time Bandits and it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's just a map of our solar system with a bunch of circles around it and numbers numerically 1 through 9, and then clocks on the side with just random times. They didn't take any time to really put any significance into their map. So there's really nothing you can gain from looking at this map. I don't know how Randall can look at the map and determine that they're in Paris in the 1700s. He knows the exact date somehow by looking at this piece of paper. But it's a movie.
Kevin does too. He looks at that map and says, "Oh, there's a portal right underneath us."
In a photo of the map, a Polaroid photo.
Right.
And they find new details they didn't see before. Gah!
Not even high res. That's right. So you just kind of go with it in this film.
Photo. It's a group picture.
But he's got the magnifying glass, and that makes it 100% legit because he's a smart kid. He's
how
Kevin.
did he not lose that the whole time? How does he have a magnifying glass? Anyway.
He's got that satchel with a bunch of adventure stuff in it, I think.
The Boy Scout?
Because he does carry that satchel around an awful lot.
All right, sure. He's got a bag of infinite holding. Okay.
So sure, the first place they head off is Italy during the Napoleonic Wars. And this is where we're introduced officially to the Time Bandits. Of course, they meet up with Napoleon, and they eventually go through another time portal. Before I heard it hurriedly flow through this stuff, Yeah, did y'all have any scenes or anything y'all wanted to point out so far at this point in the film, like maybe during the Napoleon era or Kevin's family?
The thing I noticed with Kevin's family that really didn't strike me until the end, but that does show up at the beginning, is the plastic wrap, right?
I'm
This
glad
is a
you noticed
home
that.
where all the furniture is wrapped in plastic, and then the supreme evil being and all of his minions are also wrapped in plastic. And I just
love
like the evilness of plastic wrap, and and you get distracted from that because you do a great set piece with Napoleon, you do a fun set piece with Agamemnon. Like the plastic wrap is forgotten until the end, and then it's like, wait, the evil guys are wrapped in dirty plastic wrap, and it's just the commentary on capitalism is very obvious, but just as a visual set piece, that really struck me.
I didn't even notice that until I was an adult. I mean, I noticed it before this time, but it was an adult that I noticed that, because as a kid, that blew past me that the henchmen were covered in plastic as well. Maybe those are like his most valued. They're not, but I mean, you might be led to believe that those are like his most valued treasures that he doesn't want to get damaged. Doesn't turn out to be the case, of course. How about you, Lindsay? Any notes up to this point?
Well, besides the Beast blender, which I already mentioned,
Yes.
I liked the beginning shot of the town. You're sort of hearing, it's a quiet village. You know, you're thinking, I don't know. I don't know. They just show this little overhead shot of the town, and you're like, isn't that quaint and nice and everything? But yeah, I think this beginning section had the most aesthetic tie-ins that I could find to Dark, because, of course, I'm going to look for aesthetic tie-ins to Dark as our time travel show, and to see like, oh, what is it about this show that Steve really likes? And so we had the map, like you mentioned. We also had Kevin's murder board wall that had all of the objects on it.
I never thought of it that way.
And he goes up to the wall and he pushes on it, and he's got everything kind of mapped out. And I was thinking the Stranger's hotel room, I mean, has this same look to it. And then, of course, the boxes shrinking into the wall, and how it becomes portals, and I'm waiting for Mara to climb through the box and find it. So those were just some visual things that I latched onto right away that I thought looked really good. So I do think this film had a very strong beginning, and a lot of that was because they set up the bedroom nicely. And also, I think the look of the bedroom reminded me a lot of I think the character's name is also Kevin in The Princess Bride. Isn't that when little Kevin gets the book read to him by his grandpa? I'm like, this looks a lot like his bedroom. And just the lighting and the wallpaper choices and the things. So I thought it was very familiar looking and cozy. So, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine my delight in 1899 when they first had those portals that were just like floating in midair? And like, I was like, oh my God, these guys are Time Bandits. I mean, and then when they played my song, like they played the Sweet Child in Time on that same show, 1899. Like sometimes I get these connections and I'm like, this was just made for me, not for anybody else, just strictly for me. So yeah, I'm gonna blaze past the Napoleon time. After Napoleon, they head over to the Sherwood Forest at that point. And we find out their activities are being monitored by evil as they travel. When they head to Sherwood Forest, they succeed in what they're going to do. They have like a huge lot of stuff that they've stolen successfully. But then, of course, Robin Hood steals it from them to give them to the poor. This is kind of a dirty, grungy scene. I don't think it really bodes well for Robin Hood in general and like his merry men. This wasn't my favorite scene as a kid. I think this might have been my least favorite scene when I was a kid. But like I said, like my stepdad just loved it and loved the whole punching part of it for whatever reason.
Steve, before you go forward, I have to put in a note here, okay?
Please.
That as they took the treasure from Castiglione and went into Nottingham, I thought someone needs to sit down with these men and let them know that that's not how commerce works. You can't take treasure from Italy into a different place and time and think that that treasure is going to, there's exchange rates, there's different values put on things. And so I just I felt sorry for these guys because they were going to need to figure out the hard way. And Robin Hood may have done them a favor by just taking that stuff off of their plate, because I think they would have had a nasty surprise waiting for them.
Yeah, what good do these gold stuff do to like the poor that they're handing it out to? Like, oh, great, I have this goblet now that I can drink from. Thanks, buddy.
And the poor were just waiting. It looks like the poor were just kind of waiting past a rope to be, like an admission ticket to get your.
There's no sense to be made of that. Yeah, so after this, Kevin is separated and he winds up in his favorite place, Greece. He is beside himself. He gets to rescue King Aradiapedia, and the king adopts him under his wing. Kevin loves it here, but the Time Bandits eventually arrive and whisk Kevin away during a magic trick. I wanted to point out during these scenes that the wife is glaring at King Agamemnon. I don't even know how to say his name.
Agamemnon.
There you go. She's glaring at him and Kevin this whole time, and he sentences eventually these 3 courtians to execute her. And these are all references to real Greek mythology in which this same king and this same queen hated each other, and their marriage actually ended in murder. And so in this movie, they kind of say that like it was Kevin that kind of got in the way of that, and King making Kevin his heir. So yeah, this was his favorite spot.
Also, Steve, he was battling when Kevin shows up and falls.
The Minotaur.
He's battling that Minotaur.
That's right.
Another dark tie in there.
I know. You see, you see where my brain got shaped as a young child. Yeah, this was Kevin's favorite spot. Did you guys have like a favorite time period, or is there a time period that y'all think that was missed that could have worked for this film? I'll go for you first, Aradia.
Well, I was one of those kids who grew up playing Where in Time as Carmen Sandiego.
Right.
And I really, really liked that game a lot. And from that, I first got my ancient Egypt fascination. That like I learned about how like Queen Hatshepsut like had to deal with like ancient patriarchy and like all kinds of fun stuff. So I definitely feel like any time travel montage kids movie that doesn't go to ancient Egypt is seriously missing out.
Okay. Time Bandits, you're missing out. Okay. I'll give that note to Jermaine Clement. He'll put it in the TV show. How about you, Lindsay?
Well, because of we're in the age we're in these days, I think we need to visit some other cultures besides European cultures.
Good point.
Yeah.
What is the name for that? They it means Europe and
Eurotrash.
Basically what like I think we are, because of the cast list, we are probably going to Africa, but maybe we'll go to South America, maybe we'll go to different, not
Asia,
different parts of Asia. Yeah, both West
go to
and
Australia.
And Southwest.
There's a long human history in Australia to go visit.
Be careful, Kevin.
But that's true. I mean, the Australians, it's like a lot of that gets back to, we also had a lot of people who got sent to prison in Australia. So a lot of, I know that there's the Aboriginal cultures, but I think it was very Eurocentric. So.
Right on. Well, after Greece, this is when our Time Bandits find themselves on the Titanic. And they're on the Titanic as it sinks, and they're dressed up to the nines. They've somehow found, again, with like things that don't make sense. How did these guys find 6 suits that fit them 7 suits that fit them perfectly, tuxedos no less, on a boat? I guess they have a nice mall inside there too. Is that how those boats work? But that's like the last place that we go that is in our reality. From this point, after the Titanic sinks and they're kind of floating adrift in the water, this is another really weird part too that didn't make sense to me as a kid. They all decide like to let go of the boat and just kind of let fate take its course. Well, that's evil, working its magic on them. From this point on, they're only going to the time of legend. So everywhere they go from here is just legends and strange dreams. So the first place they end up is in another boat with this ogre. They help the ogre out by stretching his back, but then they give him the old heave-ho off the boat and they take his ship. And then my favorite gross part is when they inject the giant on the top of his head with that syringe thing. As a kid, like I hated that scene, and as an adult, I didn't watch it either because it just grosses me out. Yeah, anything I've touched on there that you guys might want to jump on board before we get to the evil, whatever you call it, fortress.
I think the couple we meet, is it
Pansy?
No, not Pansy. I'm talking about Mona. Mona and the guy who wanted his back stretched out.
The ogre couple. Yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Ogre
couple. Yeah. They kind of reminded me of that. You mentioned Gilda Radner. I think it's she and Billy Crystal who are in the Princess Bride, and they're sort of, preparing their little potion and all. They reminded me of that couple, kind of.
This is supposed to be Gilda Radner in that scene. Did you know that?
Yeah, you already said that.
Okay, cool.
You said that already. But yeah, I was like, when I saw that, I thought, this reminded me of that couple. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe they thought, well, she already played a role like this, so we can't have her again. It would be too much typecasting.
Let's get Shelley Duvall to overact in here. I think that'll be better. And it was better.
Yeah, Shelley Duvall was hilarious. I love her in The Shining.
Yeah, anything from you, Aradia, before we head on?
I liked the giant sequence, not so much for the giant, and I also was disgusted by the bellows injection thing. That was awful. But
yes.
What I did really like was how much... Well, first, two things. First of all, when the giant comes on shore and stomps on the little house on the shore, that was a very Monty Python diorama, the little transition characters they have in Monty Python sketches. It really reminded me of that, which I just adored. I just thought that was so funny and weird. But then also at the end, they had a very clear and specific shot of the firefighter's boot crushing some of his toys underfoot, just like how the giant crushed that house underfoot when they came on shore. So there was this very weird meta happening there with that. So I found that whole sequence very absurd and dreamy all at the same time. It was just very weird in a way that I enjoyed. Aside from the injection part, I didn't like that.
Well, yeah, the way the guy moved in slow motion, it was very dreamy, I think. And it was a rumor among us kids that was Terry Gilliam. That's not Terry Gilliam that plays the giant. But that's what we thought when we were kids. For some reason, that was just the rumor going around, which was later discredited. The poor baby dies. He steps on that house, there's a baby crying. And when he steps on it, the baby stops crying. So that's another traumatic thing that happens in this film is a baby dies. Not good. So
also a dog. Can we talk about the fact that a dog dies? Excuse me.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. There's plenty of disturbing things happening going on here. All right. So yeah, he lures them from the time of legends through the desert. Like I was saying earlier, they've come upon the barrier, the edge of the world, so to speak, which I thought was a really neat concept. They get into a huge scuffle here, and Randall heaves a skull, I think, and smashes through. And then they're in the fortress of ultimate evil, ultimate darkness. I should remember because I've seen this so many times, but it's such a ridiculous name. It's hard to remember exactly.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just kind of blazing through this. They go through the game show. They get the map taken from them. They have to trick evil again, get the map back. And this whole ending we talked about before, when Kevin comes back, he makes his way back to Earth or whatever, and his parents get blown up. And then Kevin sees the king Agamemnon, and he's like, hey, that was the king. And then everybody just leaves him there. Was this a dream within a dream? Was this real? Did you guys have any kind of answer for the reality of this? Aradia, you want to try to go first?
Well, like I said, I hated the ending because it makes no sense. And I hated it more as an adult because I'm like, no firefighter's going to walk away from a recently orphaned child and a still smoking house. Like, firefighters put the house out. Like, even if this is an allegory for the parents dying in the fire, like, the fire's not even out yet. Why are they leaving? And like, why, like, very unsatisfying. The fact that Agamemnon is somehow making a multi-time period cameo makes me want it makes me need to believe that it is a dream within a dream, because otherwise it makes no sense. Like, the only way for it to make sense is for there to be some meta dream within a dream thing happening that I just am not quite clicking on.
Or that it's completely real and that he has time traveled and that he got a job as a firefighter and they left Kevin there, and Kevin's next job is to go jump in the Time Bandits map again, but he doesn't know it yet. I don't know. What do you think, Lindsay? Do you have any kind of explanation for this?
Well, I think it's interesting that you guys are saying dream within a dream. Why can't it just be a dream instead of a dream within a dream? Because
I mean, sure.
Because there's so much reality, I guess, presented to us.
Well, it's possible that little wee Kevin fell asleep and he started, having a psychotic delusional breakdown because of all the smoke. And so he starts imagining the things in his room. And maybe he's met that firefighter before at firefighter day, career day at the school. And he thought he was a pretty cool guy that could have been a Greek god. And so then when he shows up, he's like, it reminds me exactly of you, Steve. You said as a child, you saw Time Bandits, which has men jumping on a bed, but somehow your brain didn't process that when you dreamed about men jumping on a bed, it wasn't Time Bandits, and you thought you made that up yourself or came up with that concept yourself. Kevin did the same thing. I mean, he's just like, that is what a dream is, right? You're processing the things that happen when you're awake in your dream state.
So this is like a better movie than that Ewan McGregor movie about dreams. In dreams, this is just a complete dream. I mean, that makes the most sense, really. And Aradia was nodding along, so I think we're with you.
As long as there's no reality that is trying to mesh with what happened, I'm fine. I don't care how many dreams we use to explain it, as long as reality does not come into the picture. And then we're fine. Because dreams make no sense. They don't have to make sense. It's cool.
Right. Yeah. I wonder how the TV show is going to handle that.
Psychotic break layer. I think that's fun.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah, I think the only note that I have that I skimmed over here, which is interesting, was David Warner, also like myself, Lindsay, suffers from vertigo. And so the only scene that he needed somebody else to do for him is when he was walking up those steep steps at one point as evil. He had somebody else do that for him because the steps were too steep and were making him dizzy. So I thought I identified with that because it happens to me sometimes too. I didn't really have any specific notes for this film at this point. Do you guys have anything y'all wanted to go over before our last segment?
I did think it was pretty impressive that little Kevin knew how to ride a horse really well.
A fireman camp.
Sure.
Maybe they have horses there.
It was career day, Steve. My imaginary thing is career day, not a fireman camp. But
well, there were cowboys there too. Oh, yeah. Speaking of cowboys, there's another thing. We saw cowboys and we saw the spaceships. Those were two scenes that were written but never filmed. And they decided it would be fun to bring them in for the last part. So it wasn't any cut scenes. And also,
maybe they were saving them. Maybe they were saving those more for Time Bandits 2.
No, they were planning on filming these scenes, but they had to cut them for time and cut them for the budget. So they completely wanted to do it. Just didn't get to. The cowboys, their mouths are off sync because their dialogue that they said got changed post-production for whatever reason. So if you see their mouths look funny when they're saying their lines, that's another reason why too. Yeah, I didn't have any other neat notes for this. I think I gave all my notes the last time we did Time Bandits and this time. So I think I've said everything there is to say about Time Bandits. Did you guys have any final thoughts about Time Bandits, or are you mad at me that I made you watch this?
Well, I will say this is now the second time that I have gone on someone else's podcast to talk about a movie that I remembered in whole or in part from my childhood, and had it been a very disturbing rewatch experience. The other one is on a podcast I will plug as being very fun. It's a movie history podcast called Behind the Timeline. They were also fans of WOT Spoilers, and one of them came on our podcast, and then I reverse guested on their podcast. And for them, I wanted to rewatch Milo and Otis, which I remembered very vividly in part, but it was horrifying to rewatch as an adult because that movie is just chock full of animal abuse. And I didn't realize at the time. So that was one kind of traumatizing. And then this was different, but equally traumatizing because it answered questions about nightmares I've had for years. So yeah, thank you for inviting this very weird, disturbing trip down memory lane into my life. I don't feel good, but I do appreciate it.
Great. How about you, Lindsay? Any final thoughts about this thing?
Well, I think we need to go back to why we were watching this is because we were wanting to help you prepare your audience to watch the TV show that's coming up.
Correct.
I'd never seen the movie before, and I wanted to get to watch it with you, and I'm not sorry about that. But I think what I'm curious for both of you, and I'll think about this too as I'm asking it, knowing that we're making this TV show and, we have between the three of us, we have some different complaints, maybe more complaints from Aradia and I than you, Steve. But if we're thinking about the TV show, if we were in the driver's seat, what do we think should be in the TV show? Like what would be mainly for you, Steve? What are your hopes for the show? Like what would you want it to do better or the same as this movie?
I think the TV show is really going to hinge on Kevin. Hate to put that kind of pressure on little Kal-El, the guy who's playing Kevin. But I think that's the real charm of the movie is that Kevin takes the place of you, the audience, and he brings his morals with him and he brings, just his sense of duty and just, a modern sense of responsibility that these time bandits don't seem to have and other people that he meets in other parts of culture also don't have. So I really hope to see a nice, kind-hearted Kevin maybe meeting some people that are unsavory and, maybe Kevin talking some sense into them. I really want to see that. So I think if we have a good Kevin for our show, I think we're set. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for is a great Kevin.
Do you want it to have the same tone? Like this movie very much had it's kind of dreams and nightmares. So it's a fantastical adventure, but it's also got that edge of unsavory things happening that maybe aren't exactly what you'd expect from kids. Like, do you want that tone and blend to continue? Or do you think that's not going to work for today's viewers?
Yeah, I don't think it would work because this is not a Terry Gilliam TV show. It's being put on by What We Do in the Shadows and Flight of the Conchords are very reality-based shows, and they film in real settings, and they're done in a very documentary style. And I have a feeling they're going to bring that to this too. And I guess I really want to see them maybe not be silly, not be goofy, but give us a history lesson. I'd like to see them do that. Give us something to learn each time. They're going to give, the group a challenge, I'm sure, because every TV show has to have some kind of conflict, and every culture is going to have its own conflict of its own. I don't see how it could lose if they have a charming lead and they have a roving set of, different time periods. I don't see how it could be bad with these guys' sense of humor and their sensibility because they're not overly goofy. They're not, Monty Python style over the top. They have a real subtle style of humor. I kind of got high expectations that this is going to be a watchable show.
Do you have any thoughts about that, Aradia?
I mean, I hadn't heard really until you mentioned it that there was going to be a show. I looked up, just on YouTube to see if there was a trailer or whatever. And all I found was discussions about how the Time Bandits are not all people of smaller stature. And apparently that is a subject of much discourse because there's, I guess, not a trailer for people to have discourse about. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they make a unified motley crew of misfits and outcasts if that's not it. I mean, there's a very specific 80s shtick of being look, these are all little people and that's the shtick. And you couldn't do that now because it's weird. But you do need the bandits to have a reason for being together. But I think, Steve, you're really right that like it all hinges on Kevin, because Kevin is the audience and Kevin also has the most complete growth arc. He actually goes through like a hero's journey. He loses his mentors. He gains in strengths. He comes back as a teacher. Like he does all the things. And if you don't have a compelling person carrying that performance, the rest of the ensemble, I don't think can do it. I don't think this is an ensemble cast. Even though it's a huge ensemble cast, you got to have a good Kevin. So I didn't know to be excited about it. I haven't followed Flight of the Conchords or What We Do in the Shadows beyond the fact that people tell me to watch them. But you know, I'm willing to be intrigued and excited by this because it's definitely an interesting story. I love montage time travel. I freaking love montage time travel. I am a sucker for time period of the week. Like, bring it on. I love that as a premise. So yeah, I just am very curious if they can keep the absurdity, but also make it something that doesn't give me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, be sure to check out Sweet Shot of Time for our week recaps. We're going to be recapping the show Aradia. So we're going to, anything cringy, anything weird, we're going to bring it up. We're going to tell the truth about this show. I'm hoping that the truth is going to be, I love it. It's fun. But if it's not, then that's what we'll talk about. We'll just see how it goes because I'm going into this blind and I'm excited for it. How about you, Lindsey? I'm going to throw your question back to you. Did you have an answer for it?
Well, I was wondering, one thing I'm curious about is if they're sort of banking on the audience of this being people like you that are nostalgic, or if they're thinking, how can we gear this towards children?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think if you just do the earlier thing and bank on the nostalgia, in many cases that doesn't work. That formula doesn't work. Like I'm thinking about the Willow TV show they tried and only lasted one season. And I only watched maybe 2 episodes of that. And I was like, oh, this is really not that good. But a show like Cobra Kai, which is one of my favorite shows, what it does so well is it has the nostalgia, but it also has new characters that freshen things up and it appeals to teens and different ages. So I think if Time Bandits does that, I mean, I think about shows like Quantum Leap and different shows like that investigate different time periods. People do really like those shows. And if they do it well, and especially if they can sort of grab both audiences with young people and adults, it could be successful. I think Taika Waititi is a director that most people really enjoy. And so it really just depends on if they can find the right tone and the right, you know, storylines that engage the audience. And but yeah, you really are gonna have to like the kid and all that. So I think those are the things I would think about.
Yeah, right on. And once more, I thought of something while you were talking and then I forgot it. I was like, oh, I got a great point to make for Lindsey here. And then I just kept listening to you and then I forgot my great point. So I was listening to you, Lindsey. That's a credit to you. That's what I was going to say.
I keep a piece of paper in case I need to write something down so I don't forget. But I usually got that do that too.
But I don't have a pen. But I remember what I was going to say. If they're going for the nostalgia for the old Time Bandits audience, they've already lost it. The people who are into Time Bandits do not like this new remake. It's already getting raked across the coals. And it reminds me of like Wheel of Time. As soon as Wheel of Time, the TV show started getting made, people already hated it.
Yeah.
You already lost a majority of the Wheel of Time fandom with this TV show. So they kind of have to appeal to like newer audiences. And Time Bandits will have to do the same thing too, because I think that might be why they're reticent to like put the stuff out, because they've already gotten so much like negative heat for this, really for no reason, just because Terry Gilliam's not involved and because there's, you know, not short-statured actors in the main cast, which I guess are 2 valid complaints, but the internet has ran with them. So I hope it bodes well for our show here. I have hopes that it will.
I think like today, okay, everybody, and I'm going to go back to Cobra Kai really quick, but it's to make a point about what you're saying. The fandom, I'm on the Discord now, so I get to see a lot more discussion than I did in the old Facebook group. that I was in is people were complaining about not having a trailer. And then as soon as they got the trailer, everybody was kind of complaining about the trailer. So I think people just like to complain, Steve. So I wouldn't say based on this they've lost those fans, but right now people just they want to complain. Like, you see complaints more than you see people going, this looks awesome, this looks amazing. They're just going to target negative comments, gets more likes and attention than positive comments. So that's just the nature of the game. So I bet a lot of those people that complained about it will watch it, even though, and so they'll just need to be attention grabbing in that first or second episode. And then, but I think that it's still kind of it's up to question still whether or not that's really true. Just because people are complaining doesn't mean they're not going to watch the show.
I'm basing this on the Time Bandits Facebook group. There's a Time Bandits movie Facebook group that I joined, and I was enjoying that for a little bit. And then I started posting stuff about the upcoming Time Bandits TV show. And I got kicked out of the group for that because they didn't want to see any Time Bandits TV show crap in their Time Bandits movie group. So that's kind of what I'm basing that off of. That's why I started my own Time Bandits TV show group on Facebook, because I was like, oh, well, I guess I got nowhere to talk to anybody about this. So I better make my own group, I suppose. So that's why I say that, just based on my own personal experience with the Time Bandits old school fandom, which was not a good experience.
Sweet Child of Time is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr helps us make Sweet Child of Time. When I schedule an episode, I send the link out to my co-hosts and whoever the guest may be. We all get in a room together, an online room, of course. We all record locally on our microphones, and when we're done, we all have individual files we can download for easy editing. You can either record video or audio. If you'd like to choose Zencastr, go to zencastr.com/pricing. Use the promo code Sweet Child of Time for 30% off any paid Zencastr plan. If you want to have the same easy experience I've had with podcasting, choose Zencastr. It's time to share your story.
But I do have my last segment for the day or for the night. And as I referred before, I have a Time Bandits quiz, except you might call this the Bandit quiz. I got a quiz about bandits for you two. And this will be my last segment. And this is going to be like a tete-a-tete. I got 10 questions here. I'll just ask you guys a question at a time. And I'll start at my left with Lindsey. And hopefully, if she doesn't get the question right, I'll throw it to Aradia, because we're not going to be able to do it where you guys buzz in, because it'd be an unfair advantage to Lindsey. So, Lindsey.
All right, cool.
Are you ready for the Bandit quiz? The first question of the Bandit quiz.
Sure.
Let's go. This masked bandit is a nocturnal mammal known for rummaging in garbage cans.
A raccoon.
A raccoon. You got the first point. Hell yeah. Aradia. Okay, that's one for Lindsey. I'm going to put a finger over here. Aradia. In the 1977 film Smokey and the Bandit, this mustachioed hunk played the titular bandit.
I literally have no idea. That's so far out of my wheelhouse.
Oh. No Smokey and the Bandit. Lindsey, can you pick that one up?
I'm going to guess Burt Reynolds.
It's Burt Reynolds.
Lindsey can take that one.
I'm sorry, Aradia. I asked you a 1977 question. Let me go back to Aradia and give her a chance with the 2022 film. There was a 2022 film, Aradia, called Bandit, and it starred this short-tempered anti-Semite. Who starred in the film Bandit?
I don't recall ever hearing of that movie, but Hitler? I don't know.
Hitler in 2022.
Oh, you're asking for the actor. Sorry, I thought you were the character. I have no idea about that movie either. I'm bad at movie lore.
Okay. I'll give you a hint because I feel pity for the 1977 thing. Okay, a hint is this actor also is known as the Road Warrior.
No, I'm just not pop culture-y enough. I'm sorry. I know weird shit about nature. I don't know pop culture stuff.
I think it's Mel Gibson.
It is Mel Gibson. That's our man. Okay, look. Okay, I'm going to go back to Aradia. I need to give her a chance here because I feel bad that you don't even know the years of these. You got to know this one. Okay. This bandit often appeared on Dora the Explorer to steal items that didn't belong to him. Who was this bandit?
Nah, I'm the wrong age for Dora the Explorer. I know it exists. I know that Madeline Madden from the Wheel of Time show played her voice, but I'm not the right age to have watched that either.
Isn't that a cool little factoid?
It is.
You know who that was, Lindsay?
No, I don't. I didn't watch that show.
It was Swiper No Swiping. Swiper the Fox was that bandit. Okay, next question. Lindsay, Bandit was the dog of this specific home, which was also occupied by Laura Ingle. What was this home? Laura Ingle's dog Bandit. Where did they live?
Walnut Grove?
What was their house? What was their house referred to as?
Their house. I mean, Little House on the Prairie?
A Little House on the Prairie. That's exactly what kind of house they lived in.
Okay. I was like, what do you mean what their house was called?
It was called the Little House on the Prairie. Okay, Aradia, I was surprised to learn that there's a character named Bandit Healer on this popular Australian children's show, a current children's show.
I'm going to say Bluey because that's a random guess.
Bluey it is. You got 1 point, Aradia.
I know one thing about pop culture. And it was a guess.
Okay. Got 4 for Lindsay, got 1 for Aradia. Aradia, I'm going to ask you another one. Okay, because I'm taking pity. You might know this because this is not pop culture. Can you name the term used to describe a person who joins and runs a marathon but did not officially sign up for said marathon? There's a specific term for this kind of person.
Oh, I feel like I have heard this term before. I want to say it's got to be like some kind of prefix, crasher, race crasher? I don't know.
Okay, that's not right. Lindsay, do you have an idea?
Is it bandit?
The whole term, please. Bandit is one of the words.
Marathon bandit?
It's a bandit runner is what they call them. It's called a bandit runner. Okay, let's go back to Lindsay. This PlayStation video game Bandit was popular for being an animal of a questionable reality. Spoiler alert, this animal does exist. PlayStation video game Bandit.
See, this is where Aradia might have a jump on me because I don't have PlayStation or video games.
Nah, I'm not a gamer in the slightest.
Okay, that'd be Crash Bandicoot. I'm not either, but I thought that was fun. All right, I got 2 more, but I put them in a different thread. Of course I did. So far, it's 4-2. Good job so far, y'all. Okay, Aradia, you're first. There's this group of bandits that were notorious train robbers between 1889 and 1908. Can you name them? This gang of bandits.
I feel like I've heard of them, and you'll say it, and I'll recognize it, but nope.
I'm going to say something that's just off the top of my head, but it's probably wrong.
What?
The Apple Dumpling Gang.
It was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Those were our 2 bandits. And then my last bandit question. Back to Aradia. This next one is, it's worth 2 points. So you could tie with Lindsay if you get this right.
Oh, dang.
Okay, back in 2010, there was a young teenager who was arrested.
I knew what this was going to... okay, go ahead.
There's a young teenager who was arrested. He was stole 5 airplanes, multiple cars, broke into many vacation homes, and was eventually arrested during a high-speed boat chase. This young man was known as the What Bandit.
Oh, I remember this story, but I do not remember the name.
I think Lindsay's got it because her brain was...
No, I don't. I thought you were going to bring up somebody else, another kind of bandit, Steve.
This was the Barefoot Bandit. He flew his planes barefooted because they would find his footprints in the concrete of the airplane hangars. What were you thinking, Lindsay? I want to know what bandit you were thinking of.
The Wet Bandits from Home Alone.
Okay, I should just give you a bonus point just for even mentioning the Wet Bandits. I didn't even think about
bandits. Name any bandits you know, and then you might get a bonus point. But no, you don't have to give me a bonus point.
Well, you already won anyway, 4-2. You won handily. And yeah, me and Heather had to Google bandits in general just to find, bandit questions. But yeah, we had fun doing so. Now it's just time for plugs to say goodbye. Aradia, thank you very much for joining us on Sweet Child of Time. Now we've been guests on each other's podcasts. And tomorrow, Aradia, we go head to head with our songs. Lindsey, you might not know. Lindsey, you do know this. You've seen my Wheel of Time parody song. I get to air it tomorrow, and Aradia has done one as well. She's done a parody that I have not seen. She hasn't seen mine, and there's 80 other individuals who have done Wheel of Time parodies. So tomorrow on WOT Idol, it's July 2nd and July 3rd and then July 6th. Is that correct, Aradia?
Yes. Go to the Dusty Wheel on YouTube. There will be preliminary rounds tomorrow and Wednesday at, I believe, 8 Eastern in the evening. It's maybe it's earlier than that. I don't know. Go to the Dusty Wheel on YouTube. That's where all the information will be. I will actually, my entry is on day 2. So if you're on, they sent the emails out today saying what day we're on. So I know that I'm on day 2.
Oh.
I don't know what day you're on, but
I did not get that email.
It might be in your spam folder.
Now, who's deciding?
They set them up randomly, and they do preliminary rounds the first 2 days and then combine the results on Saturday. Because, 82 entries is a lot of entries. It's going to be some long days for sure.
Yeah, but who's voting is what I mean.
Oh, the
who's
audience.
Deciding which
all
songs
the fans.
win.
The audience.
There's about 600, there's been about 600 of us or so that usually tune into the Dusty Wheel.
It probably averages more like 400, but it can go up to like 600-700 people. And it's polls. They put polls into the YouTube chat and you vote live and they record it on a spreadsheet and that's how they do it.
It's a lot of fun. It's like 3 of the larger Wheel of Time YouTubers get together and they do that. Aradia has been a guest on the Dusty Wheel recently, but the Dusty Wheel is the one that heads it. And our listeners aren't going to be able to tune in to the ones that we're talking about on the 2nd and 3rd because this episode comes out on the 4th. But on Saturday, you'll definitely be able to check out the Dusty Wheel on Saturday because that's when I believe the finals are, like Aradia was saying. And I'll be plugging the heck out of it. So you can just follow my links that I'll be sending out. But besides Wheel of Time spoilers and WOT Idol, anything else you want to leave us with, Aradia?
Soon, someday, I'm going to have a website that I can send you to for all my production projects, and you can find all of my projects in one spot. But for now, check out WOT Spoilers. Check out the Hot Nuance Book Club if you're interested in analysis of YA books from the 80s and how they make us feel. And really check out WOT Idol. Seriously, I gotta plug WOT Idol. You will not find better entertainment anywhere. It'll be on the finals. It'll be 2-3 hours of some of the finest just talent show parody song content you can get anywhere, and it's entirely free. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to go to a bar. You can just stay at home and just watch an unreasonably talented fandom just going all out. Yeah, that's what I gotta plug.
Yeah, right on. And Lindsey, over to you. What do you got to plug this week for one of my stories or for otherwise?
Yeah, right now I'm trying to get my Alabama Pilgrimage podcast ready, but it'll still be a while. I think I'll be working on Cobra Kai recaps that I cannot drop until the 18th. But
your trailer came out today.
The trailer came out today, yes. So what I released today was the character list. Since I can finally do that, there was sort of an embargo in place that was making that kind of nasty. But I have put out an article that talks about who are the new cast. Some of them are returning, but they haven't been here a couple seasons, and who are the new cast. And so, the fandom is all abuzz about the part 1 trailer that just came out. So that's all I've really been thinking about today.
I figured as such. When I saw the trailer was out, I was like, I know Lindsey's all about this thing right now.
Yeah. Oh, and I should plug that I have a Spotify page now for my music that I've been doing with Steve. So you can follow me on Spotify now, Lindsey Dunn. And there are other Lindsey Dunns. So just look for the Midsommar photo of a girl wearing a flower crown and you can find me that way. And it's Lindsey with an E-Y. So please check that out because I get pennies for every click.
That's right.
Every click.
They will listen to Lindsey Dunn featuring Introvoid. They will listen to Introvoid featuring Lindsey Dunn. Take your pick. I mean, we got it all out there. And that's one thing I'll plug too is we just recently released our single, Thus the World Was Created. That's Lindsey on vocals. It's a song we co-wrote together. I'm enjoying it myself. It's out there on Spotify under Introvoid and under Lindsey Dunn. And we're already working on our next one. So be looking for that soon too. Next week, we're going to be talking to myself, Lindsey, and my wife, Heather. We're going to talk about some music teachers in movies such as Whiplash and Mr. Holland's Opus. And then after that, we're going to be going into the Time Bandits. So starting July 29th, I'll be doing Time Bandits coverage pretty much for the rest of the year. So that's what we got going on. I appreciate everybody listening to Sweet Child of Time and checking out Time Bandits. Aradia and Lindsey, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you guys always find water and shade and shoes. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.